For years, I was promised that Hunter x Hunter was the undisputed greatest of all time, seeing hyper-analysis, philosophical reading guides, unlimited glaze, and I finally finished all 400 chapters of the story. My conclusion? That's it? Is this really the intellectual peak of battle shonen? Because from where I'm sitting, it's a flawed mess of fights between random characters and enough exposition to make you think that you're reading a novel. Somebody's gotta lobby Congress to set hard limits on how authors explain things, dude. This is ridiculous. I didn't dislike my time with Hunter x Hunter overall, saying that would be excessive, but this really goes to show you some of the issues of expectations and pre-hype. The way people talk about this story would lead you to believe that it's one of the most gripping and intellectually challenging works of our time, so when I go into it with these expectations set by those who cannot stop holding it up to high heavens, I come out of it ultimately let down by what seems to be a pretty solid shonen manga with some really high highs and some really low lows. A manga I give the probably controversial score of, well, you know, we should probably wait until later for that. A gigantic world that is still expanding, concentrated settings that challenge our protagonist, lessons in humanity and the human condition, fights between guys I will never remember the names of, and a grueling pace like you're on a road trip to nowhere at times. Let's dive into the many intricacies and many tedious elements of Hunter x Hunter. This is a video I had a hard time starting to work on because Hunter x Hunter is really, really big. I don't mean that in terms of how long it is, though it is pretty decently long, sitting at over 410 chapters at the time of writing. To the uninitiated, Hunter x Hunter is one of the most legendary battle shonen of our time, following Gon on his journey to become an official hunter, licensed pro hunters who hunt excitement, people, items, and so much more. It's really hard to define. Gon, our protagonist, wants to become a hunter to find his father Ging, a world-renowned hunter and also a loser deadbeat who abandoned him. It's also about the many adventures that Gon will encounter while searching for Ging, making new friends like Killua and Leorio, coming to encounter fated foes like Hisoka, and so much more. What's also huge about it though is the fandom and the community. So notably, anything and everything I say that is critical of the series is going to be put under a heavy microscope by people who have been fans of Hunter x Hunter their entire life. For the sake of clarity, I have not been reading this series since 1997 like apparently some of you claim to have been. I didn't grow up watching it on TV or reading its volumes. I haven't even watched the anime still. I'm pushing 30. And 2 months ago, I started reading a volume a day on average, meaning I finished it in a little over a month. And now I bring this up for two reasons, one of which we'll get into later in this video, and the other being, well, I didn't have a real-life decade to sit and ruminate on everything Hunter x Hunter has to offer, or what an arc like Secession War is building up to. I didn't partake in community discussions, theorizing, or agenda-fueled discourse. I simply read the manga. Something that will stand out immediately when picking up Hunter x Hunter in the modern day is just how much the format of the ever-popular magazine it runs in has changed. It jumped up by the time I finished the first arc, the Hunter exams. There are no big bombastic moments that are scientifically designed in a lab to capture the attention of a Zoomer or a Gen Alpha, desperately jingling the keys to keep their eyes away from the Cocomelon present on the iPad beside them.
Jingle, jingle, pay attention.
There are no big set pieces or bloody combats, and this also extends to a lot of Hunter x Hunter. Of course there are big moments, and of course there are fights, but they feel so spread out, few and far between. This isn't a criticism either. If anything, I would say it's a breath of fresh air going from modern Weekly Shonen Jump to one from around the time that I was born. The narrative, and especially the first arc, feels so grounded and willing to take its time to explore all kinds of aspects of the story. It's a level of patience that isn't affordable in the modern day attention economy. And the second I finished the first volume, I thought to myself, dude, this would not survive in 2026. Some people correctly point out that the rate of axing in Weekly Shonen Jump is actually unchanged throughout its runtime. And what that means is series that are prematurely cancelled. But what this stat point ignores is the context of pacing. Having grown up as the new era of shonen takes over, I've seen firsthand the jokes, references, and memes relating to how slow old shonen is compared to modern day heavy hitters. Those jokes don't exist for no reason, and I mean, let's look at the current era poster boy, Kagurabachi. Don't get me wrong, I love Kagurabachi. It's currently my favorite battle shonen ever, but let's also not kid ourselves and say the pacing isn't completely and utterly fucking insane. A distinct fear of getting axed within your first volume has been born, and for many, even people that have no chance of being axed ever, like Kohei Horikoshi, author of My Hero Academia, even within their final arc, had nightmares of being axed. I don't think an arc like Hunter exams could ever exist in the modern day interconnected era of short-circuited brains. I barely think a shonen like this could exist in the modern day, so to see Hunter x Hunter still running despite Togashi's poor health, and to see it still be something fairly unique among its contemporaries is, to me, really interesting. The series feels like such an interesting outlier among the stories that it releases alongside of the magazine these days. Exceptionally slow, contemplative, and really not afraid to play with the medium, even if it doesn't always work out. And always work out, it does not. Not specifically with playing with the medium, but a lot of the things that Hunter x Hunter does different than your current modern shonen. You see, because of the fear of the looming axe no matter what stage of life your series is in, every panel, page, or story beat feels like it's hyper-optimized in eternal fear and anguish over the consequence of a bad reader survey. Every chapter can feel impactful or gripping. It feels like things are happening with characters that feel relevant. And of course, this, comes with its own issues too. There are a lot of issues when it comes to proper build-up and satisfying execution due to rapid pacing, but I would say Hunter x Hunter suffers from the inverse. Gon's dad, Ging, delivers a quote that has seemingly very deeply resonated within the Hunter x Hunter community and the way they approach the story. Quote, "You should enjoy the little detours to the fullest because that's where you'll find things more important than what you want." End quote. It's an age-old idea of enjoying the journey over the destination, to prioritize the steps to get there more than what awaits at the finish line. It's something that the community holds dear, considering that the series has been in print for nearly 30 years. Fuck man, I really am pushing 30. With a multitude of hiatuses along the way, and because of this philosophy that people seemingly ascribe to the way Togashi views art, especially when chapter 339 also drops this page about how something more important than the thing you're hunting could be right there by the side of the road. As I've gotten older, I've tried not to apply the philosophies and ideas in a person's work to the way that they actually feel about things, but a lot of people do believe in journey over destination, and I wouldn't be surprised if Togashi is much the same, especially considering his relationship with Hunter x Hunter as a series that he's chipped away at for so many years through repeated health struggles. It's a fitting piece of wisdom, telling people to alter their relationship with the through line of life experience. That while you may have goals you want to achieve, like finding your father, gathering the stolen body parts of your family, achieving wealth and more, there is still going to be all this lived experience in between that will change you, and the process in itself is one you will look back on more than the conclusion. Many people also apply this to plot beats of Hunter x Hunter, but this is where I think this journey over destination lesson begins to fall apart personally. In my opinion, climactic moments and conclusions in this story largely feel underwhelming. Controversially, I was not a fan of Hisoka vs. Chrollo. While I still think it's good, Miriam vs. Netero did not grip me the way it seemingly did the rest of the community. Personally, I was waiting for Gon's reunion with Ging to be underwhelming, and I thought that's what we were headed towards, and I thought that was a good twist, but the way it was executed did not impress me. Tension in Gon and Killua's relationship felt gripping at times, but the destination felt like it held punches along the way, and I'll get more into some of these things later. When I read Hunter x Hunter, I read community discussion on these things, since I had a lot to catch up on, and I wanted to see if there were ideas or themes that I had missed. The pervading responses or discussion points, however, left me wanting more, and one that continually floated around discourse about underwhelming conclusions was journey over destination. I'm not blanket opposed to the concept. For something like Gon's arc in Chimera Ant, in which his drive for revenge and quest for vengeance for Kite gave him no real tangible reward, and in fact hurting him by taking away his den, which is the power system of the story, something far too intricate to get into this video, I think that's a strong message and a way to utilize an intentionally anticlimactic conclusion. The reason this feels well executed is because the message at the end of the journey was crafted so that the destination intentionally felt ill-fitting. There's a sense of intentionality, but this isn't going to be a one-size-fits-all for all journeys. In my opinion, journey and destination are not entirely independent factors, but instead exist in a sort of symbiotic relationship with one another. Part of the reason why a journey means anything to begin with, especially in a narrative context, is because a story's journey is going to make implicit promises along the way, that the things happening in this journey will be honored at some point, that it's going somewhere, that eventually the weight being given to this concept will be justified. While you can have a shit ton of fun heading to Japan to try and, peer through Togashi's windows to get a crumb of manuscript information during a hiatus so you can post it on Twitter, all of that fun is still predicated upon the destination's existence. You're going there for a purpose, with some sense of intentionality, like you mentioned prior. Unless, of course, you're a wealthy oil baron who just, flies around to feel something, and in that case, instead of doing that, can you leave a $3,000 donation in the comments, please? I need this. A primary distinction to make here is that journey over destination can be fitting advice for real life, and I think that there are a multitude of ways that this message can be applied to Gon and Ging. Gon's entire goal throughout all 300 plus chapters at the time was to reunite with his dad, and there's effective build-up here for this to be an underwhelming reunion, considering all we hear throughout the story is that Ging is kind of a fucking loser and actively avoids encountering his son. Maybe it's a personal projection of my own relationship with my dad when it comes to this stuff, but I agree with the conclusion that Gon meeting his dad doesn't actually matter. He wasn't in his life to begin with, and instead, the connections he's made along the way and the life experience he has gained through the Hunter exam, Heaven's Arena, Yorknew, Greed Island, and Chimera Ant are all far more important than what awaits at the finish line, but the issue is, stories are not real life. A story is a constructed experience, and construction implies intentionality, and the way that Gon and Ging's reunion is handled doesn't feel like it's pointing towards a journey over destination, even though Ging keeps talking about it. It feels unceremonious with how Gon and Ging just start chilling, like, oh, I guess we're cool? I guess we're gonna spend some time with Ging now? We're gonna start talking about journeying in the future with him and shit? Alright, I guess. I liked it more when Ging was a deadbeat, and I mean, he still is, but I wish there wasn't even an attempt at making the two have cordial interactions or setting up a more proper reunion atop the tree where Ging tells Gon about his goals with the Dark Continent. More feels like the story wants to have its cake and eat it too, having an underwhelming and unsatisfactory reunion between father and son, but also trying to create a nice and charming moment between the two of them, and it feels almost like a betrayal of what was set up. Another story beat I've been very unsatisfied with is Hisoka vs. Chrollo. Chrollo is probably one of my favorite characters in Hunter x Hunter, and when I finally got to the long-awaited battle between the two, I was the most disappointed I had ever been in this story. It had been a match built up since the introduction of the Phantom Troop and Yorknew, hundreds of chapters ago, and it's a complete wet fart of a climax that gets heralded as one of the greatest battles in Shonen because of Nenmaster versus Nenmaster, I guess? Sounds familiar. Okay, some context here. Chrollo founded the antagonistic group known as the Phantom Troop, a ragtag found family group of thieves and criminals who hail from the largely abandoned and poverty-stricken Meteor City. A quest for vengeance from Chrollo initiates the group's notoriety, vying to be feared by the world as a whole, and they are nicknamed the Spiders, and Hisoka was previously a member, joining only to satisfy his urge to battle Chrollo to the death. Chrollo to me is a character character that embodies a lack of identity and self-motivation, for lack of a better term. He holds a core belief that he has instilled in the spiders that his life, despite being the head, is not a priority. He is someone who puts the survival of the whole above the individual, and in a series where Nen is explained to be an extension of oneself and how that power manifests, Chrollo immediately grabbed my interest by having an ability that quite literally steals from others, serving as another indicator of his lack of self and struggles of identity and what he wants out of life. Hisoka, on the other hand, reads like a hedonistic individual who aligns himself with nothing besides his own self-motivation and self-interest. Every decision he makes is out of what he desires or finds the most interesting. He feels no specific alignment to the troop and joined purely for his own goal of fighting Chrollo, a character that is basically diametrically opposed to the way Chrollo operates. This can also be seen in the way their designs are presented. Hisoka being tall, easy to spot in a crowd, and colorful, as if drawing attention to himself and his way of life, whereas Chrollo is dark and brooding. Even his height is basically smack dab average. The fight between two people who couldn't be any more different had been built up for hundreds of chapters, and had been Hisoka's main motivation since Yorknew. And when we get to the fight, it's 3 chapters of power explanations, gestures at characterization for things that we already knew, and Nen mechanics, before the fight is shelved. You know, maybe we'll get a rematch in 250 chapters. The aftermath is better than the fight itself, showing us a change in Hisoka's approach and how he's going to kill all of the spiders because of his obsession with Chrollo, and now Chrollo is crestfallen over the increasing number of dead family members of his. This fight is glazed because of Nenmaster versus Nedmaster, or of course, journey versus destination. At least per online discussions I've gone through, trying desperately to find something I missed in this encounter. A fight promised to me 3,000 years ago can now be considered intentionally mediocre because of themes and such. Themes are a powerful storytelling tool, but a tool must be utilized properly, and this is the trap that Journey over Destination sets for Hunter x Hunter as a critical framework. It becomes a way of preemptively forgiving every conclusion before it happens. If something doesn't stick the landing, then we can now reinterpret it and absorb it into that philosophy, with people imploring the viewer that it's subtext that must be extracted by the reader, and I'm sure at times that is true, but it's also sort of like a literary theory form of lampshading, pointing out an issue with the narrative before it appears to insulate yourself from the criticism. A series that is allegedly so intentional and so masterfully crafted that now, per the community, must rely on the crutch of a retrofitted philosophy that protects it every time it fails. For Gon and Killua's send-off not really working for me, I have a hard time putting it into words, but the way I feel about it is that it also just leaves a bit to be desired. After Greed Island, it truly felt like there was so much tension between their relationship due to Killua's feelings of inferiority and Gon's recklessness. We would get so many moments of Killua pondering if he's even worthy of walking by his side or vowing to leave Gon's life, which to be fair does actually happen. The two go their separate ways, and it's a sort of awkward, amicable separation between the two, which I don't want to say it doesn't make sense because it does. Sometimes that's just how friendships go, but Killua felt a bit more than just a friend to Gon. I'm not trying to imply romantic feelings, I just mean that Gon's position in Killua's life was severely elevated. So the unceremonious separation between the two doesn't really feel like it adds up to me. It feels like that there's something missing from Killua's perspective here, or that more could have been addressed about their relationship. In fairness, it's very possible that this is intentional and going to be addressed, as Gon and Killua are seemingly coming back to the story after a decade of not being present. So I'm not going to harp on this too much, but I guess this kind of circles back to Journey over Destination in a way. Gon and Killua's relationship and Hisoka versus Chrollo both have lackluster conclusions that sit protected from criticism because, well, the story isn't over, and also it's about the journey, man. Of course, Hisoka versus Chrollo is now not the destination. Maybe the rematch will be, which officially makes their first fight, if they even get a second one, officially a part of the journey, which brings to the forefront the next issue with the Journey over Destination reading of Hunter x Hunter. Sometimes, unfortunately, the journey isn't all that exciting. There were a lot of volumes where I had to fight my eyes wandering or trying to skim because the characters on screen or the content that was unfolding was so painfully uninteresting, like Heaven's Arena, or aspects of the election arc, or the entire first half of Chimera Ant, where we spend volume after volume developing intricacies of Nen and people's Nen abilities, or characters that I could not tell you the name of having fights and encounters that way overstay their welcome. That makes the intentionally underwhelming destination make me feel cheated by the also underwhelming journey. I cannot understate just how often while reading Hunter x Hunter I was hitting the Vinland Saga praying image, just begging that we would go back to Gon or Killua or Kurapika or Chrollo, Hisoka, Miriam, just fucking anybody, man, because while there are a lot of characters in Hunter x Hunter that I am completely and utterly indifferent about, the main characters, the ones that everyone knows, most certainly steal the spotlight when we get to them. Despite people coming to Hunter x Hunter's side by claiming that the destination isn't as important as the journey, characters like Miriam get both a fantastic journey and destination. It's probably unsurprising, but Chimera Ant was in fact really, really good. Is it the zenith of the medium and the best shonen arc ever written? Probably not. Was it still an exceptionally good time with powerful conclusion and great character work? Yeah, for sure. Gon and Killua, in my opinion, have a really good dynamic, even if Killua is, doing some heavy lifting if you ask me. The tension placed on their relationship by the events of the arc and how neither of them are necessarily well adjusted added a really powerful through line to the events of the story. It's something that can be seen throughout their time together. Gon is reckless. He seemingly has zero regard for his own safety or well-being. He's always willing to put himself on the line, and some of the basically self-harm he engages in because of that is at times hard to read as we watch this literal 12-year-old actually blow his fucking hands off. He's selfish and really only thinks of the things that he wants. So that makes his feud with Hisoka throughout the series interesting, because while Gon wouldn't go to the lengths that Hisoka would to get what he wants, he will still disregard those around him to achieve his aims, a single-minded obsession just like Hisoka. This can be seen in Greed Reed Island when Gon desperately wants to win the volleyball match and uses his signature John Can Rock at the expense of Killua's health. He has a one-track mind and the freedom to execute his desires, and because of that, Killua ends up describing Gon as the light of his life more or less. He's completely captured by the kind of person Gon is, not seeing his selfishness and self-destructiveness as a fault, but as a wonderful sign of liberty and assuredness in who he is. Having grown up in an assassin family, having had his path predetermined from the start, and living life being treated as such, and as a Zoldyck, he was enamored with the way Gon lived his life. He showed him how different things could be. He gave him a goal to strive for, and because of that, he would agree to do reckless and toxic things like letting his hands be blown apart by Gon. He's there to rein him in when Gon is acting too extreme, but he's unable to step back and view Gon and his circumstances objectively because of that infatuation, and also as well, you know, they're both like fucking 12. So Chimera Ant really shows Killua this toxic ambition that Gon can hold, as his single-minded obsession shifts to something seemingly against Gon's values throughout the story. We regularly see Gon put the value of a human life on a pedestal. He never wants to kill anyone, but in Chimera Ant, he has a revenge fantasy to kill Pito for what they did to Kite.
Right through his fucking neck!
I know it's a meme in Hunter x Hunter discussions, you know, Gon lost his humanity while Miriam gained his, or, you know, the light and darkness of Gon, but, I mean, it comes from a place of truth, and that much is true for how Killua perceives Gon moving forward. Personally, I don't think the conclusion to this schism in Gon and Killua's relationship is as satisfying as it could have been, like I mentioned earlier. Journey over destination, I guess. But it's still thematically powerful, and goes to show you the earlier point I brought up about the concept of journey over destination and intentionality. Gon being unceremoniously healed by Nanika and Aluka, and only losing his Nen is supposed to be unceremonious, if you ask me. It's supposed to represent the fleeting nature and borderline pointlessness of Gon's bloodlust, betrayal of his values, and his unintentional harm of Killua. He didn't avenge Kite by killing Pito. It didn't give him anything. While he may not be permanently injured or dead, his relationship with Killua has been put under pressure. His Nen is gone, and he's left to wonder, well, what comes next? It's kind of funny, for how many criticisms I'm sharing of Hunter x Hunter in this video, I seemingly don't feel the need to agree with the most popular one, that the Aluka and Nanika plot resolution for Gon's issues is an ass pull. I mean, is it one? Sure, I guess, but I guess I don't really care. I like the content that comes from Killua and Aluka's relationship, and I like what it does for Killua's character, being a seemingly big send-off to someone who means so much for Killua, that this is his way of repaying Gon's kindness before the relationship is permanently changed. The Gon and Miriam parallels are obvious and a meme in Hunter x Hunter conversations. Gon, someone who was against killing to almost a detriment, and Miriam, who opens up by flagrantly taking people's lives. They end up swapping positions by the end of the arc. Gon pummels Pito into effectively fucking paste, and Miriam refuses to take any more lives, even refusing to fight Netero for a long time. The primary difference I would wager with Gon becoming a monster and Miriam becoming a human is that it feels like it misses a core function of the Chimera Ant arc. It wasn't about binary categories of human and monster, and for the uninitiated, Miriam and the Chimera Ants, these aren't humans necessarily. It was about the overlap that the two share and how humanity is just as capable of monstrosity as seemingly inhuman entities, as evidenced by the Rose Bomb, which, I mean, is an obvious allegory. I'm sure I don't have to hold your hand here. Even Gon, the supposed virtuous light in Killua's life, can end up taken over by violence and vengeance to the point of threatening Komugi's life by sheer proxy when she didn't do anything to contribute to the Chimera Ant's goals. She was just a bystander who happened to be related to Miriam, so Gon threatened her life. The dichotomy of Gon and Miriam, to me, shows both the terrible and beautiful results of both love and human connection. It brings Gon to homicidal rage because someone he had a connection with was taken from him, while it simultaneously brings Miriam to peace and understanding due to the love of Komugi that he held. It's something so fundamental to the human experience, and people, no matter how virtuous or twisted, can be impacted by them in different ways. It can bring great tragedy, and it can bring great joy. I do find it quite entertaining how Chimera Ant as an arc is treated. It's by far the best arc of the story, and it has quite the powerful messaging with great execution. I think because of that, it's treated as this absurdly deep and philosophical work of art that requires reading of the works of Plato and Marx to truly grasp the intricacies of, when frankly, it's an extremely explicit arc that wears its concepts on its sleeve. And this isn't a criticism of the story by any means. Sometimes I'm quite fond of the idea of subtext is for cowards, but I'm also entirely unsure of how this arc gained such a reputation as being a deep, complex, and difficult to tackle piece of work. It's a simple to understand message about the range of human experiences and the abject cruelty humanity will inflict upon other living creatures, including humans. Simple doesn't mean bad, just to clarify. A complex message is cool, but I'm someone who likes to analyze execution over the idea, and the execution of Chimera Ant is good, great even. It stands tall above many battle shonen arcs that I've read, that's for sure. And even though the first half was like pulling teeth reading it for the first time, I think it retroactively justified itself by having such a fucking powerful and awesome to read climax. But the way people interface with this series is something I have a hard time understanding. To me, the way people discuss these characters in this series, it feels like a lot of fill in the blanks. Like, it doesn't actually give you a lot to work with. Now, I'm not one to be against reading into what might not actually be there. I'm an anime analysis channel, for God's sake, and if you saw some of the shit I've been saying about ReZero, you might think I've actually lost my fucking mind. The point being, I'm a big fan of interpretive analysis. Okay, Sorry, this meme is kind of rage bait. This image and its variants, they're pretty funny to me, but I'm not a fan of this kind of mentality. I despise the curtains are blue approach to artistic work, and as someone who is a fan of Death of the Author, and concepts such as deconstructionism, more on that later, I implore and support people diving into text to pull out possible unintended readings from it. Perhaps Togashi didn't think of that, but there are many implicit biases that are placed into a work. Greed Island is one of them. It's quite astutely called Greed Island, and during my first reading of it, I thought that there were some aspects of a class allegory being implanted here. For the unfamiliar, Greed Island is an absurdly limited and expensive video game that sucks you into it like it's real life. If you die in the game, you die in real life type shit. Well, it is real life, but that's besides the point. It costs literally billions of fucking dollars and was made by Gon's dad, type of shit you get up to when you don't want to be a dad, I guess, I don't know. Its status as an out-of-print game led to a lot of urban legends about it, and people gravitated towards wanting to complete it to see what comes out of it. It's a game with your life on the line where people are basically being put to work for billionaires to achieve this seemingly impossible fleeting goal that nobody can actually accomplish, even if it means betraying those also playing the game alongside you. To me, this felt pretty on the nose at first. The game being a reference to the rat race, and not the meme from when I was in middle school. The metaphor for constant competition between fellow rats in pursuit of wealth, akin to the sham of the American dream, while billionaires pull the strings while being outside the game. It has other fairly explicit seeming confirmations of this concept, like people going to rob Gon and Killua, but struggling with the idea of stealing from literal children before deciding to do so anyway because they have mouths to feed and a livelihood to worry about, or literal health affordability issues being baked into the game. I felt it was a powerful reading at first, but the longer the arc goes on, the more it feels kind of unintentional. This class allegory isn't really brought up anymore beyond this, and that set dressing I thought I saw kind of begins to collapse the more we realize that this really was just a game set up for gang for fun. I thought maybe Gon rejecting to work with the people who criticize the game and by extension Ging was going to be a message about people opting to go on their own and rejecting a class identity, but I guess not. Doesn't amount to much, and he does just win by working with himself, Killua, and Biscuit. He doesn't win by taking advantage of other people like characters like the Bomber do, but by being an honest, hard-working member of the working class, I guess. Rather than thinking that Togashi abandoned or betrayed this class reading, however, I think it just wasn't intended, and was perhaps an unintentional depiction of how Togashi sees the world. A cruel place with people trying to betray each other, and all it takes is you and your friends to stick together to make an honest living. I don't regret trying to see more in Greed Island, but this also is what I mean by people filling in the blanks. The thing that they like has to be deep and truly ideological or philosophical, so we'll ascribe subtext to things that don't have supported interpretations, because fundamentally, an interpretation must be justified, and if it fails, well, then I guess you just have a headcanon. In my experience with Hunter x Hunter did not leave me thinking that this was an impossible to grasp love letter to philosophers that is particularly deep and dripping with subtext. To me, instead, it feels like it's quite explicit and on the nose, something I discussed just prior when talking about Chimera Ant. It's not hiding its messaging or its themes, it literally puts them in fucking plain text for you to read on the page. Again, this isn't a criticism of the series, it's a criticism of the expectations people set up for it. The constant intellectualizing and deeping of every moving part, only to actually read the manga and find out it's an earnest, open, and explicit series. I feel like it set it up for disappointment for me. It's something people grew up with, and it's something that means a lot to them, so obviously it has to be this exceptional piece of art that cannot dare stand shoulder to shoulder with these lesser battle shonen. Unlike the rest of the rabble of Weekly Shonen Jump, this one has themes and such. Something that also frustrated my reading experience was that I, for better or for worse, discussed my read of Hunter x Hunter live in my Discord server, and it feels like Hunter x Hunter fans were doing their absolute utmost to negatively polarize me towards their favorite. Now, obviously, this is a very online and pampered complaint. Won't someone think of the content creators? Most people aren't going to be doing a live read, but unfortunately, interfacing with a community is a package deal for me since I'm a creator who gives opinions on things. Anytime I wasn't really having a good time because I was watching characters I don't care about fighting, I was bombarded by, oh my god, respect this guy I don't remember the fucking name of. Anytime I didn't think a segment was as exceptional as the seeming consensus, I will be met with snide remarks about a series I enjoy. Anytime I ask for clarification on why a moment was apparently so legendary and good, I will be met with humming and hawing, an inability to extrapolate why something was enjoyed, and when something was finally addressed, it would be a plot summary. In fact, this was my experience with a lot of things in Hunter x Hunter. A lot of the time, I would read something and I would seek outside analysis, something I normally don't do. I try to insulate myself from other people's analysis because I want all of my ideas to be my own, and perhaps that's naive, but I feel like I had to have been missing something about the series that made it so special to so many people. I was like, dude, am I fucking reading Hunter x Hunter wrong? And when I searched for Twitter posts, Reddit threads, or anything of that nature to find out what was so magical about this content, it would just be plot summaries and buzzwords of peak and swag. Hisoka versus Chrollo is so incredible because it's built up, and it's Nedmaster versus Nedmaster. Greed Island is really good because it's a good training arc and the cards are cool. Don't get me wrong, you don't need an in-depth reason to like anything. You can just like things. That's your God-given right. I guess to me, this is just another manifestation of the way people talk about the series series coming to bite me in the ass, because just like so many things, I was left wanting more. More powerful subtext, more powerful analysis, more powerful philosophical messaging, but I guess things really are just hype moments in aura. Hunter Exam was a solid introductory arc, but it didn't blow me away. I actively did not enjoy Heaven's Arena, and the arc that finally had me gripped and made me start enjoying Hunter x Hunter is one that I imagine a lot of people like, Yorknew. I'm a big Kurapika fan, which is surprising, not because I thought Kurapika would suck or anything, but generally I'm a protagonist fan. My favorite character is more often than not the protagonist, and I end up spending the most time thinking about them. I did try to do this with Gon, however I feel like Gon's content is quite dull. It's not all that powerful outside of Chimera Ant, and strong Gon moments are spread so few and far between that I never felt particularly attached to him. Perhaps this is why Hunter x Hunter isn't a favorite of mine, but still, Kurapika is great to read. The arc where he takes center stage is the one that really started to grab me, because similar to what we discussed earlier from Gon and the Chimera Ant arc that comes a bit afterwards, Kurapika is someone much more extreme in his quest for vengeance. Vengeance in anime isn't a new thing by any means, but I think the way it's executed with Kurapika's character is pretty cool, and it's always one way that Hunter x Hunter benefits from being a long-running series. 400 chapters in, and we see that his motivation still hasn't changed, even if he begins to worry about what may come afterwards. He was really the first character that felt like they gave me something to sink my teeth into, a kid who desperately wants to avenge his dead clan and retrieve the eyes that have been stolen. How far he's willing to push himself in order to achieve that goal, even by making a Nen contract that limits his capabilities solely to punish those who had wronged him. He gets a power boost when he's fighting the Phantom Troop. His friends try to pull him back from the brink of what amounts to self-annihilation, and they do succeed in some aspects, but Kurapika's response is a unique one, it feels like. I get the impression that in many stories the lesson would be, man, my friend saved me from destroying myself to achieve my goal, isn't that wonderful? And a good lesson that would be. But Kurapika doesn't take that away. He takes away that it's best if he stays away from them. He's aware that Gon, Killua, and Leorio are capable of making him waver on his warpath, so he does his best to put distance between them to achieve the only thing he feels he has in his life. He participates in the very markets and trades that facilitated the theft of his clan's eyes so that he can get them back, because he isn't thinking about the future. He's trapped in the past. Anything that hints at a future beyond him now was almost scary, and we see this uncertainty of what lies beyond his goal at the beginning of the Secession War arc, when he considers what he even has to go back home to when everything is said and done. He's hurting himself, possibly betraying his own sense of values, isolating himself from the people that care about him, and leaving himself as an unrecognizable human being. Approaching Kurapika's arc this way immediately after Gon and his betrayal of his own values in the Chimera Ant arc is something I find interesting, and it makes me wonder where his character is headed here, especially since we got even more direct parallels to him and Chrollo, with Kurapika being able to yoink powers temporarily, and Chrollo getting the backstory about avenging his family from Meteor City. When I saw that Kurapika was probably going to take the spotlight for a while for the Secession War arc, I was pretty invested. Gon isn't my favorite, so this shifting in focus, just like Yorknew, the arc that really started to grab me, had me perk up a little bit. Secession War is, unfortunately, the most miserable experience I have had with Hunter x Hunter so far. Going into reading it, I also knew that people said that Secession War was the arc with the potential to surpass Chimera Ant, which, in fairness, I thought was great, so I cracked it open, and oh my god, man. It's effectively everything I've disliked about Hunter x Hunter, but dragged to an almost absurd extreme. A multitude of characters that I don't care about, where the story does not work to make me care about them, before introducing more, and more, and more, and more, and giving me exposition on every prince, every guard, every speck of dust in the fucking ship, all delivered in the least interesting ways imaginable, whether it be not utilizing the visual medium whatsoever, or by not building up my care for these characters before dropping plan after plan after plan on me, or just giving me raw explanations of their powers and Nen beasts. It's a complete and total bloated fucking mess, and it's clearly my most controversial opinion in the fandom. Earlier in the video, I mentioned how I read the story in about a month at a rate of 5 volumes a week, taking 2 days off. This is relevant now. This arc, when you're not reading it over the course of 10 years due to hiatuses, is an absolute fucking nightmare. I had struggles through Hunter x Hunter, but Secession War spelled the first time I caught myself repeatedly glazing over the copious amounts of text before having to go back and start from the beginning of the page. I get the idea of wanting a deeply woven and intricate battle for the throne between all the princes, but that doesn't automatically mean the execution is good. It's quite fucking poor and grating, in fact.
Big dog, you're supposed to be our #1, and you're playing like a bum.
I have a terribly hard time getting invested in any of these new characters, and when there's a chance for it to happen, we move on to more dudes in generic military outfits to listen to their grand strategies or thoughts on the ongoing conflicts. My throat hoarse from begging for Kurapika to be back on screen. The scope is drastically too big, and not enough time is used getting us invested in their plotlines via the characters we're already invested in. The reason I remember the names of Wobble, Oito, and Bill is because they're anchored by Kurapika's involvement, and by proxy, it generates a modicum of interest as we continue forward. And when we continue forward, oh thank god, we get Guard 6-7 and a prince I cannot for the life of me remember the purpose of, followed by 4 straight pages of information that you're expected to absorb. I enjoy the jokes of novel X novel, but I don't necessarily find it to be true. If this were a novel, it would be a terrible slog of a read. Novels aren't just raw explanations and dialogue, usually. I understand the criticisms on mediums being a visual one. I'm just not someone who thinks that people should be stuck in rigid tradition or guidelines of how art should be created. I can respect that what Togashi is doing here in Secession War is unlike anything else running in Weekly Shonen Jump, and I can also understand that it's seriously not working for me.
Bet you better start doing your job.
I appreciate experimentation. I wasn't a huge fan of the static shot between Hikari and Yuji in Jujutsu Kaisen Season 3, but I appreciate the directorial ambition utilized as such a non-standard shot for a TV anime. Succession War, however, is universally praised for being one of the most complex manga arcs ever, wearing the fact that they've had to reread the arc multiple times to remember everything that's going on as a virtue of the arc and not a stain. It's not like a film where, you get to go back and see little details you missed or plot lines that are recontextualized with future knowledge. It's studying and doing homework to maintain a grasp on the happenings of something I don't care about. The primary difference is that I was presented with everything Succession War had to offer, all at once, and it wasn't fed to me piecemeal over my entire adult life like a lot of enjoyers of this arc. It's a gigantic issue of information delivery, and I'm well aware that my opinion is by no means the consensus. Reading an arc I'm not invested in and being expected to hold a gigantic wealth of information for characters I'm not invested in, and then dropping nuclear bombs on my head of pages of raw text and information made for genuinely terrible reading experiences, and the common response online is that if you don't like it, you're not woke, or you're an anti-intellectual. I'm not led to believe that this is an intentional toying with and experimentation with the otherwise visual medium of manga. I think it's poor information delivery that does not make use of any aspects of the visual medium in any interesting way. It feels more like that Togashi has this gigantic web of plot lines, schemes, motivations, and characters that he is not doing a good enough job keeping up with. And the primary way he's doing that is by assuming that you need to know every single detail of every single plot, motivation, and mindset before we can move on, leading to experiences like this. I find it interesting that I hold such a dissonance between Succession War and something like Greed Island, an arc that is criticized for lots of exposition and power explanations, but for some reason, I don't dislike Greed Island at all. I thought it was fun. I was initially very puzzled by why I enjoyed Greed Island. It feels like it's something that I shouldn't enjoy. Lots of characters we don't know, lots of powers I don't care about, and a lot of mechanics or technicals. I think what made Greed Island work for me is that while it does explore a lot of things that would interest me on the surface, it does so by anchoring me to things I do care about. Yeah, it's a training arc, but I like seeing Gon and Killua progress and their relationship develop. Yes, there's a lot of card bullshit, but I like learning the specifics of it and how Gon, Killua, and Bisky will make use of them and when the deck seems, stacked against them. Yes, there are groups with individual motivations on the island, but it's also a backdrop for Gon and his group's motivations, as well as how they are weaved in with people of the Phantom Troop showing up, or Hisoka working with Gon and so on. Greed Island doesn't feel like it abandons the shit I care about to show me shit I don't, I find is the fundamental difference. It's possible it's because of his health that Succession War is the way it is, and I vehemently disagree with people who think that Togashi should just find an artist while he writes. An artist does what they want, and it's clear that Togashi values his vision for the story more than bringing on an artist. I don't think any single member of the audience is entitled enough to his work for him to compromise his values of presentation. I respect his experimentation, I respect him sticking to his guns. Succession War fucking blows. And I do not appreciate when people wield Togashi's struggles with his health as a shield to insulate the series from very just criticism, or assert that not liking multiple volumes in a row of raw dialogue or exposition is anti-intellectual, or framing it as a moral issue like Hunter x Hunter fans seem so prone to do. Posts on the subreddit claiming that Togashi is challenging the way you read a shonen manga, and a general air of smug superiority for anything and everything relating to Hunter x Hunter. It's never a failed conclusion, it's a subversion of shonen tropes. It's never a lackluster character moment, it's a deconstruction of battle shonen as a genre. It's never too much information being delivered in an uninteresting and overly complex way. It's challenging the very medium of manga. Is Hunter x Hunter subversive? I don't know. It will be far too presumptuous of me to make this remark considering I haven't read many of the shonen coming out at the same time as Hunter x Hunter. Not that it stops the people who call it subversive, because something they like is really advanced and mature. Is Hunter x Hunter a deconstruction of shonen? The fuck does that even mean? I'm familiar with deconstruction in the philosophical sense, which calls into question the objective nature of words and their meaning. From my understanding, though I am by no means professionally educated on this topic, so please feel free to correct me in the comments, structuralism referred to the signifier and the signified. If you are beside a tree and someone used the signifier tree beside you would be the signified. This is a tree because it is not all other things that are not a tree. Deconstructionism asserts that signifiers do not refer to the signified, but to other signifiers. It calls into question the way people interpret language and references how every single person is a unique existence in their own way and will interpret signifiers in their own way. To summarize a long and complicated topic, it is my understanding that it is a reference to the subjectivity of language, and text or language is heavily shaped by perception, and due to upbringing and cultural forces, people express themselves in terms of binary oppositions, such as white and black or masculine and feminine. Deconstructionalists also disagreed with formalist critics of the time who believed that literary works had a stable and discoverable meaning, or this idea that there is unification at the center. Deconstructionalists argue that a text is never unified. It will always be pulling in multiple contradictory directions. There's a level of undecidability with deconstructionalist readings, the idea that a text will always generate multiple incompatible meanings simultaneously, and no reading, no matter how careful, can permanently settle which one is correct. So, deconstruction, as a literary term, was further interpreted by philosophers like Richard Rorty, who would posit that deconstruction refers to the act of reading a text against itself, looking for contradictions in logic or values, and unraveling a work's messaging, deconstructing the surface versus what it's actually doing. How are either of these referring to Hunter x Hunter as a deconstruction? They aren't. Deconstruction was in fact further deconstructed per the original term, and now an online fandom refers to taking apart genre tropes in a way that shows inherent contradictions. The most popular way this materializes is examining how a trope would play out with real-life consequences applied to it. Some point to ReZero as a deconstruction of the isekai genre, as it places the severe wish fulfillment and horrors of time looping under a severe microscope. Hunter x Hunter fans seem to have further interpreted this point as meaning simply that Hunter x Hunter is not like the other girls. It's dark and mature. The protagonist loses sometimes, unlike other shonen. It has the protagonist doing bad things and the antagonist doing good things, unlike other shonen. It has a lot of violence and it's really dark, unlike other shonen. I would say that these things are subversion of expectations, not deconstruction, and perhaps not shonen tropes. But if I'm enjoying a manga in a magazine for kids, then it has to have something in it that makes it better than the other media for kids. People are under the impression that works that are targeted towards a younger crowd cannot contain complexity, depth, or nuance, and it just isn't true. Hunter x Hunter is a shonen. It's not a soft seinen, but that only partially dictates what the content of the story will be. It just means that, they can't do full-on lesbian sex spreads. Oh shit. Okay. We'll put a pin in that one, I guess, never mind. A lot of the Hunter x Hunter fans you'll talk to online are like temporarily embarrassed true adult fiction connoisseurs, misrepresenting the series and offering substance and philosophical depth that doesn't exist, that will impact reading experiences all over for an otherwise good story. Despite my complaints about its utilization of side characters, its meandering and grating pacing, and its simplicity in the face of promised advanced college reading level, I still enjoyed Hunter x Hunter. Early in the story, I enjoyed the world we were plopped into. It felt unique and odd. I enjoyed the characters that got lots of focus. I wouldn't say main characters were proper duds, even though I was underwhelmed with Gon's arc. Despite the flaws in pacing, I enjoyed that it could afford to be slower than some of its contemporaries, and I was interested in the fact that there were so few fights in so much of the story despite running in Weekly Shonen Jump in the 2000s. My final score for Hunter x Hunter is a 7 out of 10. That might sound surprising, but I had a good time. For those curious about my arc rankings, it would be Chimera Ant, which I thought was really great, Yorknew, which I thought was good, pretty good even, Green Island, which I thought was good, Hunter Exam, which I thought was alright, Chairman Election, I was on, Heaven's Arena, I slightly disliked, and Secession War, I do not like at all. I will be keeping up with the story even though I find Secession War a genuinely bad slog to read because I know the series can do better. I understand much of what I spoke about in this video goes much against the grain of the popular consensus on Hunter x Hunter, but I hope I was able to demonstrate my tastes and why a lot of the story doesn't necessarily match them. As usual, I have no problem with people who think it's peak fiction. I'm glad you can enjoy to that extent, and that there is something in the series that you spot that I cannot. This video is purely my opinion, and it is not by any means meant to influence you away from something you love, but I finally read the titanic presence in shonen known as Hunter x Hunter, and these are my thoughts on my experience. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe for more. You can also check the description down below to become a member, which gives you benefits like early videos, membership badges, and cool custom emotes. You can join the Discord where we talk about ReZero, Kagurabachi, Jujutsu Kaisen, and all kind of stuff. Additionally, you can go to the channel store and pick up some awesome stickers made by our channel artist, so you can carry the power of Graphia with you on your water bottle. That's about it though. Thank you for watching. See ya.